the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings. I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -268952.2. Apologies for being a little late this morning. I had some equipment trouble. It took me a few minutes to recover from that, but at least we're not too far behind schedule. That is just how that happens. In fact, it's a miracle that this hasn't happened before now. We've done how many of these briefings at this point, and this is the first time that something like this has occurred. So, all in all, I consider it a win, even if it was slightly inconvenient today. But it's probably okay because I expect today's briefing to be a relatively brief one. And I know that I say that every time, it's rarely true, but hopefully this time it will be true. I think we're going to be able to get through this topic relatively quickly today because for today, I wanted to cover a few items that they're kind of different from each other, but they're not. Each one is kind of too small to cover as a separate topic, and they don't really slot into the topics of any of the last few briefing videos neatly. So I've kind of sort of been creating a list of these little mini topics, and I think I found a way to sort of tie them together in a way that makes sense today. So we're going to be covering them today. So a list of sort of mini topics that I am categorizing as the values of a Starfleet officer or the attitude of a Starfleet officer. But before we get into that, I'd just like to welcome everybody who is here in the chat with us. Thank you for being patient with us. We've got Captain van Kroonen, we've got Lieutenant Kemmerly, we've got Colonel Yobert, Master Chief Kotzer, and Chief Newton. Welcome, everybody. Remember, of course, if you are an active duty member of the Dauntless and you are available at 12:30 on a Tuesday, you're welcome to join us in the screening room on the Dauntless Discord. If you are not an active duty member of the Dauntless and you're available at that time, you're welcome to join us on YouTube. We are streamed live there as well. Of course, I'm typically only paying attention to the comments that come through via Discord, but occasionally I might be able to glance over at the YouTube comment stream from time to time. So there's a chance you might be able to reach me before the end of the video via YouTube, but it's better if you're an active duty member of the crew and you can join us here in Discord. If you are not available at that time, then you're probably watching this at some time in the future. You're watching it either on YouTube or on Facebook, which is where this video is typically distributed after the fact. All right, so I'm not going to have any visual aids today because, again, these things are relatively brief individual topics, and these are more kind of conceptual ideas and less sort of day-to-day on-the-ground practical stuff. And the first item I want to talk about, which is one of the principal values of being a Starfleet officer, is truth. And this is something that is picked on in a Next Generation episode called The First Duty. And that is exactly what this is. The first duty of a Starfleet officer is to the truth. And what does that mean? It means that insofar as we are able to do so, we should always endeavor to make sure that we are telling the truth about any given situation. We need to be able to trust each other, and that trust comes from the truth. That's why those words are so similar. They have a similar etymological origin, I believe, trust and truth. So we need to be able to trust what each other is saying, and that means that we need to be able to be honest with each other. Now, there's a lot of philosophical ink has been spilled over the millennia about exactly what truth means, exactly when or how or under what circumstances it's appropriate to lie, or how honest you must be. Of course, there was a story arc in the first season of Star Trek Picard that dealt with a character that subscribed to a philosophy of was it absolute candor, I think was the what he called it, which was this practice of always telling all the truth all the time, which we saw made things quite socially awkward. And that's not really what we're talking about here. We don't necessarily want people to be blurting out every thought that pops into their head, whether or not it's appropriate, whether or not it might hurt people's feelings. But it does mean that as a Starfleet officer, we are obliged to tell the truth about things, under most circumstances, generally all the time, right? So lying about things is right out. If you don't have something nice to say, rather don't say anything, rather than telling a lie. Don't be feeding somebody false information about something that might lead to them making decisions under false pretenses, at least under false information in the future, that kind of thing. You don't want to be contaminating your message or our message or anything like that with false information deliberately. Now, that is not to say that we are perfect. We don't have perfect information all the time, although, uh, being curious individuals, as I believe most Star Trek fans are, we like to make sure that we're as well informed and well read as possible most of the time. But that doesn't mean we can't make mistakes. It doesn't mean we can't pick up incorrect information from time to time. And sometimes we'll pass it on because we think it's true, and we might be wrong or incorrect about that kind of thing. But knowingly telling people lies, trying to mislead people, spreading falsehoods, that kind of thing is generally right out. And this is, this is not something that's unique to Starfleet. This is something you can find in most moral and legal codes dating back to sort of the Ten Commandments and the Code of Hammurabi and people like that, that you don't want to be lying to people. It's not a good idea. Let's not do that. That's some of the ink that I was talking about having been spilled for millennia. Of course, back in those days, they weren't writing with ink. They were etching things in clay tablets, but that's, that's a metaphor. So the first duty of Starfleet Officer is to the truth. And most of the time, day to day, this is relatively straightforward. When it becomes difficult is when situations become uncomfortable for us. When somebody's feelings are on the line, or when our future is on the line, or some aspect of our career, or some other stakes are high, then it might be tempting to dissemble or to tell falsehoods in order to escape the consequences of our actions. And that's the time when our character is under the most stringent test, and that is the time when it is most important to tell the truth. And that is kind of the message of the episode in which this line is given to us in the Next Generation episode, The First Duty. You may recall, of course, that this was the episode in which Wesley Crusher and his fellow cadets of Nova Squadron are caught out for having been practicing an illegal maneuver, and one of their cadets was killed in the accident, and they tried to lie to cover it up. And that is when the stakes are high, and that is when honesty is the most important thing. So not only did they do an illegal thing, but they then compounded the error by lying about it, and that made the consequences that much worse for everybody. Nick Locano famously went down the tubes. Wesley Crusher's Starfleet career never really recovered. Sito Jaxa, although she was able to get posted to the Enterprise, bad things ensued. In other words, it wasn't a good idea. It wasn't a good time for anybody. So telling the truth, always the best policy. Which leads us to the second point on my list, and that is, this isn't a Star Trek quote, but it's a pithy one. My word is my bond. We see in Star Trek plenty of occasions in which Starfleet officers offer people their word, as if that is something that can be relied upon to be true. And it is. Because if a Starfleet officer's first duty is to the truth, when I tell you that I'm going to do something, you should be able to assume that that's true, because you should be able to trust that my first duty is to the truth, and I'm not going to lie to you. So when I give you my word that I'm going to do a thing, you should be able to trust that I'm going to do it, or at least that I'm going to make every effort to make sure that I do it, right? Because again, people are not perfect. Under all circumstances, in every way, in every aspect of every part of life, you can't be relied upon. Nobody can be relied upon to be perfect all the time, right? You can make a promise with the best of intentions, and life gets in the way and prevents you from doing the thing that you had every intention of doing. You can't be held responsible for life getting in the way of doing the things that you planned on doing, but you can make sure that if you promise to do a thing, you make every reasonable effort to do the thing that you promised to do. And if you're not able to do the thing that you promised to do, to make sure that you are communicating back to the person that you made the promise to make sure that they know that you're not going to be able to live up to the commitment that you'd made. And this is something that happens every day here on the Dauntless. So we have quite a lot of activities. If you're an active duty member of the Dauntless, you are aware of that fact, that we do a lot of things. And we have mechanisms through which we can indicate that we are planning to attend a mission. For example, I'm going to be at the park run on Saturday. I can indicate via Discord to say that I'm interested in attending. That is my way of saying, yes, I'll be there. And if I can't be there, then it's on me to make sure that the people who are going to be there know that I'm not going to be there. That means either just removing my intent a click from the Discord event or sending a message to the away team letting them know that I can't make it for whatever reason, transport issues, feeling ill, whatever it might be, life has gotten in the way. I'm not going to be able to live up to that commitment that I've made. Something like a priority 3 mission is, the commitment there is relatively small, so the stakes are low, but the stakes get a lot higher when we get to more important activities. Things like priority 1 missions, where we have life or death consequences, when donating blood with the team can mean the difference between somebody living or dying. That is when the stakes are very high, and that is when your word being your bond is very, very important. If you indicate to the team that you're going to be present at a priority 1 mission and then you don't turn up, that is why there need to be consequences. That's why we have things like fail to report in flags on our records for people who don't turn up at priority 1 missions, because the stakes are high and that we're counting on you to attend. And if you don't do so, then you're letting everybody down and you're letting yourself down. And you're especially letting down the person or people whose lives would have been saved by the unit of blood you were going to donate that day. So my word is my bond is a very important value of being a Starfleet officer. And although it might sound trivial when we're talking about fun, casual social events like park run or games nights or anything like that, it's a pattern of behavior that leads to developing trust between you and your crewmates. And if you're continuously letting your crewmates down, they are going to lose their esteem of you in their minds. They're going to learn not to trust you, and that is going to erode your perception, or their perception of you as a Starfleet officer whose first duty is to the truth. There's another one which again is related to the issue of truth, which is again not a Star Trek quote. I believe this quote is attributed to American President Ronald Reagan, and that is trust but verify. So because we are all Starfleet officers here and we are all devoted to the truth, we can probably trust that everyone around us is telling the truth most of the time, or pretty much all of the time. But that doesn't mean that everybody is always right about the things that they're saying. Just because they're telling the truth, or at least what they think the truth is, doesn't mean that that is always accurate. So when somebody gives you an important piece of information, and they believe with their whole heart that that is true and that it's real, that doesn't mean that you can necessarily take it as fact. You need to be able to verify that information through a third party. So trust, but verify. Trust that the person you're talking to, especially if they're a Starfleet officer, is telling you the truth, but make sure that what the information they're giving you is accurate. Captain von Krenin says, like today might not be Tuesday today. Yes, so you want to make sure that when your crew members tell you that it's not Tuesday, but you think it is Tuesday, you might want to check your calendar and see whether or not it in fact is Tuesday, as today it is. So trust, but verify. So trust is the corollary of that whole the truth thing. So if we really are committed to the truth, then we engender a lot of trust in our crewmates. We can all trust that each other are going to be honest with us at all times. But that doesn't mean that everybody is always right. People have inaccurate ideas. People pick up false information from time to time, and they might relay that information because they think it's true, but that doesn't mean it always is true. So you want to make sure that you're verifying the information that you're receiving, just in case. So moving away a little bit from the whole truth thing, there's another important value of being a Starfleet officer, and this is something that's referred to even in the Starfleet's membership handbook, which is the practice of praise in public, critique in private. So there are always going to be moments in any interaction between humans that are going to be difficult. People around you, although they might be dedicated to the truth, although they might be indicating, they might be doing their best to live up to their word and that kind of thing, there are always going to be moments where we are disappointed in the performance of our colleagues, because everybody's human. Everybody messes up sometimes. Everybody says things that they, with the best of intentions are true, but it turns out not to be true. People make mistakes, that kind of thing, right? So there are going to be difficult moments from time to time. People's relationships could deteriorate, and those kinds of things can be difficult to manage. But the one thing we want to be doing, we want to be emphasizing this in all layers of Starfleet discourse, all the way from your own department all the way up to the executive committee. We want to be making sure that we keep positive interactions open so that people can see it, and we want to keep negative interactions private, so that we can involve the smallest number of people in those negative interactions as possible. So if you have criticism for a member of our team, if you disagree with somebody's position or somebody's opinion with the decision that somebody has taken to do a certain thing, if you have a problem with something that somebody here has done, it's best to try and resolve it with the smallest group of people necessary. So if you can, you would want to address that person directly, have a private conversation, just the two of you in a direct message or something like that, and try and resolve it in that way. If that doesn't work, then you might need to involve a third person or a fourth person or a fifth person. But again, you want to try and limit that interaction to the smallest number of people possible so that you are not unnecessarily tarnishing the reputation of the person that you're speaking to. Because sometimes emotions can get involved. If you have a strong disagreement with something that somebody has said, it's easy to become emotional about that. And that emotion can inspire us to say things that we might regret. Again, with the best of intentions, we might think that we're telling the truth. But given some perspective and some hindsight, we might change our minds later about how we feel, how strongly we feel about that situation. So we want to be able to mitigate that potential future impact as much as possible by limiting those negative interactions as much as possible. So keeping those interactions to a smaller group of people as possible. And this happens even at the highest levels of Starfleet. So there is a strict disciplinary protocol. If somebody has broken the rules of Starfleet and they get taken to the Inspector General, the smallest number of people of possible are involved in that investigation, so as to isolate any kind of reputational damage that might accrue to the people involved in that investigation if it's found that everything was done in good faith. And even if it was found that it wasn't done in good faith, we still don't want to be tarnishing people's reputations by shouting their name in public about what a terrible person they are. Things are handled as quietly as possible within the confines of the rules. So praise in public, critique in private. Praising in public is an important part of that too. If you see somebody has done something cool, you want to be mentioning that publicly, right? You want to be announcing it on the relevant forum. You know, don't be doing things in irrelevant places, but in the correct channel, in the right way. You want to be pointing out that somebody around you has done something awesome. This helps to ensure that that person receives the proper recognition for the cool thing that they've done. So praise in public, so that everybody can see the cool thing that they've done. Critique in private, so we can limit reputational damage to people who might have upset you. Captain Brunkuna says, looking at the EMH, we do not speak his name. Our emergency medical hologram, of course, is an AI bot who lives on our Dauntless Discord, and he's still learning. He can be quite difficult to deal with sometimes. He's also not a real person, so reputational damage there is perhaps less serious than it might be to an actual human crew member. Moving on to the next thing, which is not really related to those previous points. The next one is your idea, your project. Now, here in Starfleet, we are all, I would venture to say, we are all intellectuals. We are thinkers. We're people who like to think through problems, find solutions. A lot of us are very creative people. We can find very creative solutions to the problems that we face, whether they're big problems or small problems, or just ideas on how to improve things around here. Now, it's tempting to want to list off a bunch of ideas of cool things that you would like to see happen in Starfleet, in your department, in the Dauntless, in Starfleet International, Region 8, any sphere of influence. It's easy to spin off a bunch of ideas that you have that you would like to see happen. The problem is that all of these layers of the organization are operated by volunteers. Every single one of us is a volunteer here. Nobody is paid for doing any of this work. So when you're spouting off ideas, all you're doing is you're pointing out, yes, correctly, that it would be nice if these things happen, but also you're perhaps unintentionally suggesting that other people need to do that work for you. So instead, we have a policy of your idea, your project. If you have an idea for some way to improve Starfleet or the region or the Dauntless or your department or your away team or anything like that, if you've got an idea for how to improve things, then the responsibility is yours to make sure that it happens. Now, you might not necessarily have the skills or expertise to do the thing that you had the idea for. You might not be able to produce some kind of fancy app or a piece of equipment or something like that yourself, but it is still your project to make sure that it happens if you would like to actually see it happen, which means going and finding somebody who has the appropriate skills or expertise and persuading them to join you in that project. But again, persuading them is on you. It's your project to make sure that that happens. So your idea, your project. It's not fair to be assigning work to other people because you think that it would be better if they did those things. If it's your idea, if you come up with it, it's on you to make it happen, or at least to lead the project, if not do the actual work yourself. So bear in mind when you're making suggestions about things that could be done to improve things, that it rests on your shoulders to implement the suggestions that you're making. And that leads us to the last one on my list, which is, now this is not my wording, but I think it fits, and that is the right to whine. So humans like to whine. It helps to unburden ourselves. It's cathartic to moan about things that are uncomfortable or awkward or unpleasant. It helps us to process those feelings, and that in itself is beneficial, right? And if you're only whining to your significant other or your best friend or your dog or your therapist, then there's nothing at all wrong with that. But if you are expressing, especially openly, a dissatisfaction with the way that something about Starfleet is being done, first of all, you're coming a cropper of the praise in public, critique in private rule there. So you want to be limiting your whining to private discussions. But even so, if you're submitting complaints up the chain of command, even in private, about the way things are done, and you're not prepared to at least offer solutions or come up with ways of improving things, or outlining a project plan for how it could be done, or giving an itemized list of exactly what needs to change, then nobody has to take you seriously. Again, that comes back to the previous one of your idea, your project. If you're whining about how things should be different, it's on you to make sure that they change. If you don't think that your away team is having enough away missions, it's on you to organize those away missions, or to make sure that those away missions are being organized. If you would like to see more people join the Dauntless, it's on you to join the communications department and assist with recruiting. If you think that our new recruits are not being processed fast enough, it's on you to join the command department and assist us with onboarding new recruits, and so on and so on. So you are free to whine. Anybody is free to have any opinion. But if you would like to whine, especially about the way things are done, it is your responsibility to take upon your shoulders to do something about it. Because if it's your idea, it's your project. So although you have the right to whine, it is a whine that needs to be earned. Correction. It is a right that needs to be earned. All right, that is everything I had on my list today. And it looks like I was correct in that this is going to be a relatively short one. We're under 30 minutes for the first time in a while, which is fantastic. I'm not seeing any questions coming through. I'm checking Discord, nothing specifically addressed to these topics. I'm not seeing anything in the YouTube chat. So I think that that is all for today. So we're going to be doing this again next week. If you have any specific questions that you'd like to be addressed, either about these topics that we covered today, or if you would like us to explore things in a future episode, please feel free to drop it anywhere on Discord or on YouTube, message me privately, or drop a message on Facebook or anything like that. All of those things are acceptable, and they will make their way back to me so that I can take it into consideration for future episodes. If you have suggestions for some episodes, now this is an example where I'm specifically asking for suggestions. You don't have to write the script for me. If you have ideas for topics that you would like to see covered in future episodes of the briefing, please feel free to submit those as well. I will add them to the list, and hopefully someday we'll get around to the suggested episodes that you have put forward. Okay, I think we're going to call it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and thank you for being patient, those of you who are in the chat who had to wait for me to get my equipment back up and running again. We managed to get through it, and it's not even 1:30 yet. Thank you, everybody, for joining.